Welcome to the Complete Story Series, where I take trade paperbacks and single issues and I break them down into digestible bites to help you understand. Then I read it dramatically back to you. All alterations to the panel, text, and images are to prevent copyright problems, and all art is owned by its respective companies. Now, this volume takes place after Volume 2, and it continues the story of Harbinger, but it also wraps into Harbinger Wars. So it's going to be kind of a shorter episode, and you have to kind of watch both those episodes to really understand what's happening in this. At the end of our last chapter, Peter searched with the help of Chris and Faith, locating other potential psiots and activating them. After recruiting Charlene and John, the group was captured by Project Rising Spirit. Everyone managed to escape, and at the end, Peter decided that if he couldn't save Joe, he will at the very least save these people. Over in the Harbinger Foundation war room, Toya Harada is being told by the bleeding monk that they need to speak. He enters the monk's mind and then he walks in to overhear the end of a conversation between the monk and Peter Stanchek. Peter asks what is he supposed to do when he finds these kids, and then he turns and sees Toya Harada and he asks, what the hell is he doing here? Peter gets ready to attack, but Toya looks at the monk and asks, why are you here? And furthermore, why is Peter here? The monk tells him that he felt that it was necessary to tell him about the imprisoned Psiot children. He foresees a role for him. Peter begins to ask if this is some kind of a trap, and the monk tells him that his meeting with Toya has now begun, and that his has ended. But believe in what he told him. Become something greater than yourself. A short while later, Peter wakes back up in the middle of the desert with Chris helping him up. Trying to stay away from Toya, the group leaves and they begin driving, and then from the back of the car, John shouts that they should put on Pantera or something. Something not gay, or he's gonna go ape balls. Chris tells him, Torkelson, seriously, you need to whine less. This music is good desert driving music. John shouts that he told him to call him Torque, yo! Why are they disrespecting him all the time? And then he turns to Peter asking if he thinks that they can go out tonight. He's never been to a bar before. Later that night, the group stops by a bar so that John can enjoy himself, and outside, Peter waits alone. From the corner of the building, Chris comes out asking if it's okay that she sits near him, and he tells her sure. She tells him that lately he's been different, and it's kind of worrying everyone, all of these blackouts. He tells her that he's not really sure how to say this, but someone's been visiting him in his head, another Psiot, and he told him that Toya is raiding Project Rising Spirit to let loose those Psiot children. It seems that they may all be in a lot of trouble if they don't find these kids and help them out. Back inside the bar, John begins to start a bar fight when a patron called him useless for making so much noise, resulting in the cops being called. Peter and Chris come back over and they ask what happened, and one of the patrons says that the jackass smashed the place up and then passed out drunk. It was freaking hilarious. So instead of creating more of a problem, Peter blanks everyone's minds of the events, and then he gets John into the car and they leave. But just before leaving, Faith watches and tells everyone, sorry, you'll all be fine soon, I promise. Next morning, Chris convinces Peter to tell everyone about the visions of these children that he's been seeing and how they are imprisoned and how they're supposed to find them before anyone else. She explains that this might be a good opportunity for them, but Faith tells everyone to just stop it. What the heck are they saying? Those are innocent children. She's so sick of all this bull hockey, robbing banks, stealing people's cars. Does anyone think that they were made special not to do something? Chris tells her that she likes her new tood, so how about they just put it to a vote then? She goes on telling everyone that if they're in favor of taking down Toya Harada, raise their hand, and her and Charlene raise theirs. John says, that's whack! We don't need a bunch of kids running around. And then Faith asks Peter. He says it doesn't matter. They have majority. And Faith says that she wants him to want to save these kids. So he says that the monk showed him a lot of things. Scary things. But he's been in it since the beginning, so we just need to play it safe. A short while later, the group makes their way to Las Vegas when they notice the jets flying overhead. John says that it's a good thing that Faith isn't flying around, and she says, yeah, Peter told her to ride in the car today. Chris asks if he knew something, but Peter tells them that he promises he's not hiding anything. He's just following the feelings that he's getting right now. While driving through, Peter is stopped by the military telling them that no one's entering the city of Las Vegas right now. There's an unidentified terrorist group that just took over the Bellagio, and they're gonna have to turn around. For those of you who are wondering about that situation, go check out the Harbinger Wars video, because that's how the kids took over the Bellagio. Peter asks Faith what they should do, seeing as she didn't want him abusing his powers, and she says that since it's for the kids, it's all right. But he has to say the words. Peter turns back to the officer and he tells him, those aren't the droids you're looking for. And the officer shouts, all right, let them through. Once they get into the city, Peter and the rest of the gang head over to the Bellagio, and the terrorist group shouts for them to get in the ground. Chris says that she really hopes Peter has a plan, so he waves his hand, and the illusions begin to fade, which makes everyone realize that they're just physical projections, they aren't real. Once the room is clear of these projections, the girl controlling them asks if this group is also with PRS. Peter tells her, no, they don't belong to anyone, they are free, just like you. The girl tells the other one named Astral to go tell Cronus that they have visitors. Codenames will be used from here on out. As they are led to the back, Faith floats with the group and notices a boy in the back and waves to him, so the boy smiles back. A short while later, the boy named Cronus appears, telling them to identify themselves. And Faith says that they're going by code names, right? So John says, that's actually pretty badass. And Peter says, we're the Renegades. My name is Peter. But Faith stops him. It's Sting! His name is Sting! Cronus asks who activated them. And Faith shouts, Sting did! Cronus then tells him that he can understand why their trust is a little thin, but how and why are they there? Peter explains that he had visions of them escaping from the Project Rising Spirit bases, and honestly has no idea how they're supposed to help them, but they are supposed to help them. Cronus says that he sees, can he show him something? The two of them begin to walk with Cronus leading, and he asks Peter if he's ever killed someone. Peter says unfortunately, he has. And then Cronus opens a door with a room filled with dead bodies. He leans down to one of the bodies asking if he tortured those people to activate their powers, and Peter says no. Cronus goes on explaining that they were all tortured. They were put through years of psychological and physical abuse until they were forced into activation. He escaped once, but they have a billion-dollar monster being sent after them, a cybernetic organism known as Bloodshot. Out of the group who escaped, he is considered the most valuable, so the rest were killed. Peter tells him he gets it. They have a projectionist and he can wipe minds. They can just walk out of here, but Cronus tells him they can't. Project Rising Spirit has put bombs in their brains. The younger kids don't know about it, but whatever damaged the PRS facility knocked out the detonator signal. But for how long is really the question. So he's gonna stay here and hold out as long as he can, killing anyone who comes over here just so that these kids can have some sort of childhood for however long they're going to have it. Later that night, Chris wakes up noticing the lights are out, and she gets up and walks over to see Faith sitting with the boy from earlier. She says another boy told her that his name was Isaiah. He can't talk or touch anything. He can't even drop his psionic shield, but she's pretty sure that he can hear her. Faith then asks if she's having trouble sleeping, and Chris says yeah, back in Georgia, she shot a gun at people. This is all so weird. Faith hugs her, stating that she's had the same dreams, and then they hear a knock at the door. As Chris opens it, the boy says that his name is James, and he is half of the Zygos twins. Do they know the danger that they are in? The Psyot killer is coming, and they probably already knew that, so why are they here? To save them from him? The next morning, Chris tells everyone that Bloodshot is coming, and he has a bunch of other kids with him. So they're gonna have to face him, and the question is, how do you fight that thing? Later, both groups sit down and they begin discussing their plan. Chris will keep watch from a high vantage point, and once the target gets close, Zephyr will fly along the vehicle and make first contact. Once in place, Torque will stop the vehicle, and Flamingo will light Bloodshot up. Once Zephyr gets the kids out of harm's way, Peter will fly in, hitting Bloodshot as close to the hotel as he can. Then Cronus and his unit will join the fight. As the plan wraps up, Peter tells everyone to be as safe as they can, so now, let's get ready. A short while later, Chris watches and gives word that the vehicle is approaching, and Faith and John get into positions. Faith flies down to the vehicle and then sees Bloodshot pointing his gun at her. John runs in grabbing the vehicle, and then Bloodshot takes out the gun, firing next to John's face. Charlene gets word that the target is coming, so she gets ready to light Bloodshot up, and then she sees John being dragged along the road, and Bloodshot opens fire on her. She manages to deflect the bullets, but Bloodshot ends up driving through the military blockade in front of the hotel. He then crawls out telling the kids to stay in the car, and just as he's getting ready to kill John, Peter flies in and the two of them begin their struggle, bouncing off of things. Faith flies over to the wrecked car and tells the kids not to worry. She's Zephyr! She's a superhero! And then she gets blasted away from the car. The kids start crawling out of it, and the one named Clem tells her to say goodbye to herself. Peter gives word for Cronus and his unit to move in, and Bloodshot tells him that there is nothing that's going to stop him from getting to the rest of those kids. Certainly not a gang of playground soldiers. Charlene begins to let her fiery blast out, burning Bloodshot, and then suddenly Faith flies through, tackling her to the ground. John grabs Faith as she swings back for the others, but as John is holding her, she struggles to look over at the one controlling her. John gets it moving towards Clem, and then he starts to drop the psychic hold that he had on Faith. Charlene runs over to help Faith, and then they look back to see Bloodshot beating Peter with the butt of his gun. She blasts him away, and Chris radios down stating that the jet fighters they saw earlier are coming into town, and they're getting ready to, and that's when missiles are launched at the hotel. She's going to die. Faith shouts for her to hang on, and she begins to fly upwards towards the missile, and she thinks to herself how there is so much that she wanted to say to everyone, how much she loved being with them, how this is the greatest time of her life. And as she gets closer, Faith concentrates and begins to pull the missile towards herself, and she begins to fly off. Chris shouts for her to stop, but Faith continues to fly until she finally gets away from everyone, and then the missile explodes. Charlene starts helping Peter back up, and Peter begins to ask where everyone's at, and Chris says it seemed like his unit was under attack from up above. As she keeps watch, Chris notices toy Toya Harada flying in and tells everyone to get back inside the Bellagio. As the rest of Toya's Harbinger Foundation appears, Toya convinces the children to come with him. Cronus looks up asking if he's not with PRS, then who is he? And Toya tells him that he's the man who's going to set them truly free. But first, they must earn his trust. Cronus holds his hand up stating he sees conditional freedom. They seem to have very different definitions of freedom. Once Toya and his men leave, Peter and the remaining group go out to look for Faith. Peter can feel that she's near, and soon they begin pulling up, seeing Faith struggling to stand. Chris runs over, hugging her, stating that she saved her. She can't believe that she did that. And John picks up Faith, telling her, "I got you," and the group leaves. Though this isn't the ending that they wanted, they at least got an ending where they survived. Now, the Renegades will continue with their adventures, and if you want to know what's going on with Bloodshot and Harbinger Wars, check out that video. It came out a few weeks ago. We'll be continuing the story of the Renegades in 2 weeks. Also, if you want to know what happened to those kids that the Renegades were trying to save before Toya showed up and took them, check out the new story Generation Zero, which is the continuation of their story and them trying to be heroes. I'll put the link down below. Don't forget to follow me on Twitter and Instagram at Comicstorian, and I'll see you next time right here.